to have Dr. Deborah McIndoe, and she's from Little Rock, Arkansas. She's a nurse and a professor down there training nurses, but she also teaches students. And so we're going to hear how that works, that she can both be a professor at the Baptist Health System in Little Rock, Arkansas, and also a double as a mother and a teacher and a homeschool kids. So she's got an exciting story. So hang on. Dr. Deborah McIndoe, DNP, Doctor of Nursing Practice. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Doctor of Nursing Practice. Yes.
Well, welcome, Deborah. Give us a little bit of a background on how you came to this place and how we came to be friends and colleagues in this work, this ministry.
Well, good morning, Dr. Sweeten. I'm thrilled to be here with you this morning and passionate about the skills that I learned from you back in 1989 when I was in graduate school at the University of Cincinnati and doing my internship, learning how to integrate psychological principles with faith principles, biblical principles under your tutelage. So thank you. I'm excited to come full circle here. 30 years later, here we are.
Yeah, it's exciting because 1989, you were doing a master's in psychiatric nursing, or yes. That's what we did. We had an inpatient and outpatient unit called Lifeway, and had an opportunity to integrate all of these skills with not only the therapists, the doctors, the counselors and nurses, but the patients. And we'll kind of get into that a little bit later. Now, we're going to be teaching a lot of these same skills are already on relational peace, but we're going to be teaching more. We're cooperating with Hope Church and some other churches and letting this be known out through the community because they're incredibly practical in your Christian life and your family life and so forth. So Deb, tell us just a touch about your family life.
My family life, well, I don't know if I can do just a touch, but I'll try. We've been married for 27 years, Pete and I have. We met actually at a life seminar with Sweeten Life Systems and Equipping Ministries. And henceforth, we have 8 children, 4 biological, 4 adopted, 4 boys, 4 girls, all between right now the ages of 19 and 24. So we packed them in there.
Well, you know, one of the reasons I asked you to do that, Deb, is let people know that every interpersonal communication is sort of cross-cultural. No two people have the same culture. And so our own children have from different cultures. And because you have children from 3 different countries, 4 different countries, including the United States, that mix of cultures and trying to really communicate accurately is important. Plus, now you're training nurses to be in a hospital setting, a professional setting. And my goodness, the cross-cultural needs there are enormous. So can you just touch a little bit about how you have chosen both to train students, high school and junior high, and college students who are nurses?
I believe these skills are practical across the lifespan. In our church life, in our family life, in our professional life, of course, in healthcare. I see a need and a nook and a crack in every opportunity to influence people to use these skills because implementing these skills promotes positive mental health across the board. Whether you're a high school student, I wrote a course and used your material for junior and high school seniors. And homeschool, wrote a whole year-long course and implemented these concepts. And then, of course, in my nursing practice where I educate nurses, the first thing they tell us in healthcare is to listen. But nobody knows how to take it down to the skill level. Well, what does it mean to listen? Yeah. And so your work and us working together gets to teach the skill of listening.
That's really exciting because we did the inpatient, some of the most distressed people in the outpatient units. But what we find is people need this maybe not to have a a breakdown, panic attacks and so forth, that it's preventive and growth oriented as well. Now, Deb, you've got quite a creative outline here. You've taken this basic material you learned many years ago, 30 years ago, and you've really crafted it in a way which is, I think, excellent, creative, and brings a lot of things together. So we're going to hit this overview, and you're going to tell some stories from high school, from your school students, and as well as your students in nursing. So what is the first thing you think people need to be aware of when they're meeting a new person or any person?
Sure. Thank you. Before I dive into that, I just want to preface it by saying there's 7 concepts we're going to review, but these concepts are not linear. We don't go from assessment or awareness, which we're going to talk about in just a second. We don't go from awareness to boundaries, appropriate boundaries linearly. It's a dynamic process where we're going back and forth through all these concepts. But the first concept, go ahead.
I was going to say, because that's real life. Real life conversations may start and go through 3 steps, but then they have to go right back to the first step and start all over, especially if you're in a group. But the first step you have here is awareness.
Awareness. So I sincerely believe that the first step in healthy communication is self-awareness. And by self-awareness, I'm specifically talking about what is our perception of the person that we're listening to or the person that we're talking to. Yeah. What is our self-talk about this person? If we believe positively about the person we're talking to, then our communication is likely to have a positive slant. If we believe negatively, then our communication is likely to be disrespectful or disregarding.
I remember I've been teaching parents over the years who have special needs children, and they're always wanting to eliminate bullying. And what I try to do is say, you need to help your child and yourself change your perception so you don't allow those bullies to hurt you so badly with what they say. So it's perception is critically important on everybody's part.
Yes, we're very quick to react when people are talking with us. But what would happen if we took a step back, if we slowed down our listening and we're really self-aware? Just give it 5 or 10 seconds. We're really self-aware of our belief about who we're interacting with. I have a couple stories. Can I share them?
Yeah, please do, because it's maybe something from school.
Sure. So let me just pick from mine. So my students and I, this is a beautiful example. My students and I were caring for an elderly lady first thing in the morning, and we had noticed that her cognition had declined since the day before when we had cared for her, declined significantly. And so we were talking with the nurses about assessing this lady's status, her mental health status, her physical status. And as we're assessing her, her son walks in. And her son, her adult son, she's a grandma, and so her adult son walks in and sees her disoriented and confused and not in touch with reality. And he immediately escalates and starts pushing his way through. What's happening? What's happening with my mom? Tell me what's happening. What are you doing for my mom? And the healthcare workers were so focused on the patient that their perception of this son was that he was getting in the way, and he was he wasn't allowing them to do their work. And so they were trying to, sir, step out. Sir, you need to step out of the room. Sir, you need to let us do our job. And so I believed that he needed to be heard. And so I left my students in the room to watch what was happening medically. But I stepped out with him and said, hey, you seem very upset and concerned. Tell me what's going on. And he broke down and started crying. And he shared with me that 1 year ago on this particular day, his dad had died in this same room.
Oh, my goodness.
Space where his mom was. And so he wasn't being difficult, but the perception of him was that he was being difficult. And so people weren't patient with him. But once we just took just a minute to hear the whole story, we could then have compassion for him.
Right. Yeah. More grief and more pain than anger, or maybe a mix. But so that's a great thing, example that all of us, that we misperceive what another person is. If you tell a joke or something like that, we can misperceive, and then that upsets us, and you get a reactivity.
Another example, recently we teaching nursing students, we had a nursing student that followed the direction of the registered nurse on the unit, as opposed to reach out to her faculty member to see what did her faculty member want her to do. And so
Ah,
she was so the perception was she went around her faculty member and went to the and listened to the RN. The perception was a negative connotation of this student.
right.
As we listened and heard her story, she shared that she has a military background. And in a
Oh,
military background, you listen to your superiors. And so it didn't occur to
huh,
her that oh, I need to check with faculty. She was following what culturally she had been taught to do, was listen to your superiors. Well, once we listened and understood that context, it was easier to have compassion for her situation. Oh, you were
right.
confused, you didn't know what to do.
She was not being rebellious. She
Exactly.
was, with her culture, if the sergeant tells you to do something, you do it. You don't have to go to the captain over his
Right.
head.
That's right.
Wow. So that's the cross cultural stuff again, isn't it? That
It
we
is.
have to be familiar with what we're seeing and what other people may be seeing differently. Well, your next thing, it seems like you get the two here. The next one is assessment.
Yes. And so assessment is important because when a seeker, we'll say a seeker, someone who is who is searching for interaction with you, that person is the seeker for just for
Uh,
we can have common language, and we are the listener. So when we're
mhm.
listening, it's very important first to be self-aware. How do we perceive the other person? Next, we have to assess, what is this other person asking for? What
Ah,
are they
yes.
asking for from me? Because if we know what they're asking for, then we know how to appropriately respond. And so there's a few different categories that people of things people might be asking for. They may be asking for just understanding. Will you just
Yeah.
listen to my story and offer me a safe place to share? They may be asking for information. For
Mhm.
instance, I use the example, if someone is saying, "Hey, can you tell me where the bathroom is?" We're not going to empathize and say, "Oh, you feel an urgency to find the lavatory." No, we're just going to say the bathroom's down the hall to the right. If someone's looking for inappropriate interaction, it's our opportunity to affirm the person.
Uh-huh.
I'm sure your intentions are well, but I won't be able to engage in that. I
Mhm.
have some examples. Or maybe people are asking for anger release. Maybe they just need to be heard. They're angry and they need to be heard. And when people are angry and need to be
Mm.
heard, our role is to listen, not to affirm or decline their perspective. We're not going to jump on the bandwagon and be angry
Mhm.
with them, or we're not going to poo poo or invalidate their feelings. We're just going to listen and give them an opportunity to empty out all their feelings.
So in some ways, your first story gets into that of understanding what was this fella was going on with him, both kind of a grief and anger and fear and emotion of what was going on. And if you're not careful and know how to assess someone, you could jump to the wrong conclusion.
100%. Yes.
Yeah.
So, if I may offer another example
Sure.
from a few years ago, a patient's husband was very angry because she hadn't been offered a meal in 2 days. No breakfast,
Oh,
no lunch, no dinner in 2 days. My students had this patient, and so they're like, Dr. McIndoe, what do we do? He's mad. And the report from the nurse was that, oh, she's NPO, nothing by mouth, because she's having a procedure. And so for 2 days, the husband had been saying, "What procedure? What procedure are we waiting for?" Well, there was never any answers. So
wow.
the assessment was he's looking for information. We need to provide information for him. And he's also angry. And so we need to let him be angry and validate or
Yeah.
empathize with his anger. So we did some homework. Come to find out, this patient had had her procedure 2 days before at breakfast,
Oh,
and the signage had not been taken off of the door. It still said nothing by mouth. So for 2 days, we're still not feeding her.
yeah.
But the resolution and the trust building came when we took time to
Mm.
listen, allowed him to be angry, and then followed up and got information for him.
I like the way you said trust building, that the nurse's job, the nurse has so many things to do, life and death, and you follow orders. It says nothing by mouth. You don't want to violate that order. But if the order's a mistake from somebody, you don't know that. And so the information and everything, and giving trust to the husband, of course he would be frustrated and she would be of that. excellent explanation and story there.
This is applicable to high school students, parents, churches, small groups. We need to be assessing what people are asking us for. Oftentimes, people are looking for connection through gossip or through sharing information that isn't theirs to share. They may even say, hey, let's pray for Debbie. She had a hard day yesterday. So gossip can be couched in, let's pray for her. So we have to be very careful to assess. And when we're invited into an inappropriate interaction, listening to gossip, we can affirm the person, but decline the behavior. It sounds like you're really concerned about Debbie. I think maybe you should go talk to Debbie about that, not me.
Right. Yeah. So you're clarifying, doing the assessment again and trying to say what is really appropriate here for me and not getting maybe pulled into their problem. So that all that assessment, and now you go to assumptions. And what do you mean by assumptions, Deb?
So I love this concept. And as a matter of fact, I'll just self-disclose here. As a parent, it's very easy to assume that I know what's best for my children. Or as a nurse, that I know what's best for my patient. Or as a wife, of course, I know what's best. No, I don't, for my husband. So when we're assuming, assumptions mean I have the answers. I have the answers for you. Don't worry. I'll help you figure it out. And when we assume we know the answers for another person, we're robbing them of their opportunity to grow. We're robbing them of their opportunity to critically think. We're also setting ourselves up to fail because the minute we give advice and someone follows our advice, it's all going to fall apart. And then guess who's going to be to blame? We are, because we're the ones that gave the advice in the first place. I
think I'm really trying to help you, but what you're saying is I would be robbing you of this opportunity to learn. It's when helping hurts in a way.
100% accurate description. Like a butterfly. When a butterfly is breaking out of a chrysalis, if we give the answer per se in my simile or my metaphor, we give the answer, we peel the chrysalis back so the butterfly can fly. Well, the butterfly's wings did not get strong so they could fly, so they can't fly, so they die. Whereas if we allow the butterfly to work to get out of that chrysalis, he's strong enough to fly. If we can listen and empathetically respond to people's problems and allow them to find their solutions, they get stronger. They close gaps and get stronger.
They can fly. And we want our children to fly. We want our patients to fly. We don't want to follow them home and do it necessarily. Well, we need to move on here. Now, the next one you have in all of 7 is attentiveness. How do you put that into practice?
So attentiveness is a skill whereby we're paying 100% attention to the seeker, to the person that's talking. I'm sure you have been engaged with people where you walked away feeling like you were the only person in their world. There was nothing else going on. I've had a few experiences like that where I received someone's full attention and I felt valued. Yeah. Right now, though, attention is diverted with the phone, with the computer, with social media, with multitasking, with lack of margin. And so people rarely stop what they're doing, sit back, relax, and offer their time to listen to another person. It's the greatest gift.
The gift of presence, being present with a person. But I think with all of the media and stuff, I know in my life, I'd be watching something, reading something, and listening, but I'm not really listening. And so what you're saying is that's a huge gift to you and other people.
It really, really is. We need to. So here's a story. We had a patient in the hospital who the nurse had given him a hot cup of coffee. And he was in the wheelchair in the hallways all day long. How you doing, Mr. Jones? Oh, I'm good. How you doing, Mr. Jones? Oh, I'm good. We were interacting with him. Well, come to find out later in the day, as they went to change him, he had burned his leg because he had spilled this hot coffee in his lap.
Oh.
So he wasn't willing to share that because the elderly want to have the young people believe that they're fine and they don't need any help.
Yeah.
And the staff wasn't attentive to his verbals and nonverbals to understand, oh, there's an issue. What would happen if we weren't just blowing by him saying, hi, Mr. Jones, if we took him in and sat down and really paid attention to him? How are you? Is anything bothering you today?
Sit down and kind of look him in the eye and spend some time and say, I'm here for you.
Yes. Yes.
Critically important. Now, just touch on students because
Sure.
nothing is more important to a student's identity.
So I had a young man in my high school class a few years ago come to me, maybe even a year or two after the class. He said, hey, Mrs. McIndoe, I never got a chance to tell you. After I learned about the skill of attentiveness, I was talking to my family about it. And my dad works from home. And he stopped working and turned and talked and looked at me and talked to me when I would go into his office. And he got a little bit choked up. He's like, my dad was hearing what I was saying, didn't realize he wasn't offering me value through attentiveness. And so he started to be intentional, stopping what he was doing.
Well, that's the gift of healing right there, isn't it? That covers a multitude of problems. Well, Deb, now you've got one that's really shocking to me, and that's assertiveness. How do you put that in with what else you've been saying? It sounds like now being assertive is not tuning in, slowing down. It's more challenging.
I'm a huge advocate of appropriate assertiveness. And it's important to differentiate between being aggressive versus being assertive. Mm-hmm. So aggressive is an angry reaction where we're putting other people down, we're attacking other people. That's being aggressive, verbally and non-verbally. You've heard it said, it's not in what you say, it's how you say it. Maybe you're saying the right words, but you're saying them aggressively.
Okay.
That's reacting. What would happen if we took a minute and responded assertively? And so these are simple things, like if someone says, just comes and pops in your office, hey, I need to talk to you. But you're in the middle of something, you're in the middle of a project. Assertiveness would mean affirming the person. Oh, hi, I'm really glad that you stepped in. I need about 15 more minutes on this project. Can you come back at 3:00? Or I'd really love to give you all the time you need. I can do that tomorrow at lunch. So you're being assertive, and in being assertive, you're being respectful. You're letting the other person know what you can and can't do.
And that goes very much along with attentiveness, clarification, making sure you're really understood, and keeping that dialogue going. As you say, it's not all linear. These things really overlap. Do you have a couple of stories on that?
Sure. So I've had students in my nursing program be very aggressive about exam questions. That's not right. That's not the right answer. And want to blame other people. And leaders can be assertive and say, hey, I understand your concern. You believe the answer is A and not B. If you can find that in the book, I would love to review that with you. And so instead of reacting and blaming the student, we come under, lift up, and support the student by being assertive.
Yeah. So you could be the teacher, the nurse supervisor could get angry at that and frustrated and put them down, rather than really make it an educational moment through being self-accountable. So you're saying self-assertive, self-accountable is really what's important here. And maybe I've gotten ahead of myself here with some of it, but this sounds really smart to me about making sure you're on track with people and you're clarifying from the very beginning, because perhaps I've been a teacher and a lot of times I have been wrong in things, and you need to listen to that person and respect their input.
And I also believe that by modeling these skills, such as assertiveness, we're building up the next generation. We're showing the next or whoever we're interacting with that these skills are appropriate and how healthy they are.
Right.
It's important when we're assertive about our boundaries, that we're kind, and that we also offer another option. So, hey, I can't visit with you right now. I can tomorrow at lunch.
Okay.
I do believe that the answer to this exam question is correct, but please go look at it in the book and bring it back to me. So we're not stonewalling. We're not talk to the hand. We're keeping the dialogue open. We're being assertive with what we need, gentle and kind, but we're also offering dialogue.
Sort of the difference between a police officer saying stop and one says you got to go around the roundabout, a couple of times before you get back. That's really clarifying, and that's helpful assertiveness.
Yes. Yes. I've had students not be able to come to my class, and it's mandatory. Attendance is mandatory, but it was also mandatory. There was also a mandatory meeting at work. And so the student is in a, they're stuck. I'm mandatorily supposed to be here, mandatorily supposed to be here. Dr. McIndoe, what do I do? And so what they do is they talk to both leaders, their boss, their teacher, and find a common solution, but they're assertive in, hey, I'm stuck. They're stating their issue. They're being assertive. I have 2 places I have to be mandatory. Can you help me problem solve this?
Well, you're talking about double binds here, which I think in your profession and with a lot of kids, we're constantly in a double bind. The cancel culture, you want to obey the teacher, the school, but maybe your parents are saying something else. So learning that very early about how to work those things through sounds to me as though that's extremely valuable for your whole life.
Extremely valuable. Back in the day when I was a new nurse in a small town, I lived on the south side of this huge bridge, and the hospital that I worked at was on the north side. It was a very, very bad ice snowstorm. I was needed at work. My profession needed me at work. I was young. I was just right out of high school. I graduated from high school as a nurse, as an LPN. Well, my father would not allow me to drive to work because I had to go over the bridge. No, you're not driving to work. You are not driving over that bridge. I'm like, Dad, I don't work at McDonald's. I'm a nurse. I have to get to work. And so I was trying to be respectfully assertive. Wow. He was asserting, he was concerned about my safety. As we dialogued, we realized, oh, there's someone with a 4-wheeler that can come get me and take me to work. And
so instead of getting completely stuck in that double bind, no win, you had to figure out another option.
Right.
So I don't mean to interrupt you, Deb.
No. By being assertive and respectful, we came up with a solution. We realized we're on the same side of the problem looking for an answer.
Oh, repeat that. What do you mean the same side of the problem?
Yeah, so we're on the same side of the problem. The problem is we both want you to be safe. We both know I need to get to work. We're on the same side of the problem. My answer he wasn't comfortable with. I was going to drive. His answer I wasn't comfortable with. I can't go to work. And so we're on the same side of the problem. What do we do to find a solution together? We're not against each other. Once we realize that, we're on the same side of the problem.
So if you see that person is not on your side, if you saw your dad as the enemy or the persecutor or something, or the hospital, then you would be in a no-win. But if you saw that as a person on your side, everybody wanted to win that, but you had to figure out a way to do it.
Yes.
Get a Jeep or something.
Right.
That's a great example because you were both a student learning in the hospital, but you had to apply, you had to go. And from your father too, you were under his jurisdiction.
Yes.
That's often the bind kids get into. Well, what do you have next in your system here?
So next, I think, just like raising children, I would say, oh, this is my favorite stage. This is my favorite stage. All of these concepts are so empowering and life-giving. Again, accountability is one of my very favorites. It's a paradox. We typically don't, it's scary to be accountable. It's scary to say, I made a mistake, or I did something wrong, or this is my fault. But it's actually very freeing to be accountable. Just last night, we've had our house painted these past few weeks, and my jewelry's gone from painters being in our house. I've been looking for my jewelry. I'm like, well, what's happening with my jewelry? So I called my daughter because I put it in her room. I said, honey, have you seen my jewelry? I said, I don't want to believe that the painters took it, but I can't find it. And it was in your room. She was accountable. She said, Mom, I think it could have went to Goodwill. Everything else I took to Goodwill. And so I've had enough experience to know not to react. but to just have compassion, right? And by not reacting, that gave her an opportunity to be accountable. Mom, I'm sorry. What does it look like? Me, I think some of that went to Goodwill. Well, that's very sad for me. On the other hand, it's just jewelry, and my relationship with my kid is more important than these necklaces. So she was accountable, and when we're safe, that gives other people the opportunity to be accountable.
Well, I know your children too, and they're very helpful, they're compassionate, charitable.
They are. Thank you.
So sometimes they carry out a little bit too much charity without thinking it through, I guess. But
and isn't that how we grow? We make a mistake, but we're accountable for it, and that closes the gap.
And they had enough trust in you, or she did, that she could say, well, Mom, I have to be accountable. I have to be truthful, instead of saying, hey, I don't know what happened to it, which would be very easy to do.
Or, yeah, Mom, the painters probably took it, right? Yeah. Because I was giving her even that out. I don't know. Did the painters take it? Actually, it might have been me, Mom.
Well, and you had to be accountable to yourself and how you were going to respond or react to your daughter and say, what's really the most important thing here? What are your values?
I have to admit, so that hasn't come easy. Right? I had lots and lots of years of parenting and reacting that really didn't help me meet any of our goals of being connected. Reactivity does not facilitate connection, and I need to be accountable for that.
Yeah. I think rearing children is the greatest training ground that I've ever experienced at all. So as accountability, and then that brings us down to boundaries, appropriate boundaries. And it sounds like you've been talking about that in a way. All of these fit together.
Sure. So appropriate boundaries are clearly communicating what our boundaries are. And people are used to being people pleasers and not having boundaries, or being enmeshed and not having boundaries. And when we're enmeshed or people pleasers, that just sucks the life out of us, drains the life out of us. Yeah. When we can have appropriate boundaries and communicate them respectfully, that gives other people the opportunity to respect us, and we respect them. So an example is also, I believe in all of this, let me just backtrack a little bit. It's very important that we have ownership over these skills in our life, that we're accountable for solving our own problems, that we're accountable for having our own boundaries and communicating them. It's very easy to blame other people. Well, they crossed my boundaries. Well, they wouldn't let me off work. Well, that teacher didn't teach right. Well, that patient or that family member was mean or rude. Well, we can't control other people. All we can do is control how we respond. So one of my daughters, I teach my children to self-advocate. And if they need to get out of a situation, it's on them. I prefer them not to say, Mom doesn't want me to, or Mom and Dad won't let me. I prefer them to say, I don't want to. This isn't comfortable for me. So I had a daughter, went to college. She found herself in some uncomfortable situations. And so her solution was, around her peers, when she wanted to leave, she would just do that. She would go, SOS, Mom, will you come get me? And her friends were like, wait, what's happening? Are you calling your mom? SOS, Mom, will you come get me? and then she was able to say, guys, I'm really uncomfortable. I need to leave. So that was her making fun of it, but also getting some distance.
So the cell phone's given us a lot of good excuses for things, hasn't it?
Yeah.
You can pick up that phone and say, oh, Mom just text me, I have to go home, or something like that, rather than really being assertive, self-accountable. And what you're saying, what'd you say it was, title self what?
Self-awareness?
Your self-awareness, but in that situation, to take ownership of what you're saying. But that's one of the hardest things there is to do. That takes a lot of courage.
And then our culture will want to shame us when we say, no, I'm not comfortable with this, or, hey, I don't really like how you're talking to me right now. Yeah. Oh, well, I'm sorry if you don't like how I'm talking to you. Instead of being self-reflective, I'm coming across rude and disrespectful. Mm-hmm. I apologize.
Yeah. And I think that is the key to a lot of issues we have now. And cancel, people say, this person wrote something, I read something in a book I didn't like, and I'm triggered. you're not taking responsibility for yourself, for your own sense, your own perceptions and feelings. So by teaching this to be responsible in those kinds of situations, that I can't blame anybody else for my faux pas, and I'm not blaming other people. Blaming and shaming. Blaming is saying you're guilty. Shaming is saying you need to be eliminated. You have no identity here. I'm going to cancel you out. So teaching your children that sounds to me as though, and as a father and grandfather, one of the most important things that we can ever get across to our kids is doing it at home with their children, at work, and so forth. So you go in, you're honest, and you clarify what you need and try to work out a solution. My experience is even the toughest professors are usually willing to work out a solution, an option for people if a student really has a legitimate need.
Gary, that is so correct and so empowering. And might I expand that to healthcare? So nurses must have the skill of assertiveness and appropriate boundaries with their peers and with physicians. In healthcare, there's a lot of big heads, and there's a lot of talking down to, and there's a lot of aggressive behavior. For instance, the nurse in, where was she? I have it in my notes, Vanderbilt in 2017, that gave the wrong medication to a woman who was getting an MRI, and the patient died. Yeah. Well, that was a result of a chaotic situation. Yeah. And so having an appropriate boundary, it's very important to say, if you need me to say yes now, then my answer has to be no. It's very important to not react with a yes because of the stress that people are putting on you. So with this nurse in Vanderbilt, the primary nurse was busy, couldn't give the medication. The next nurse was busy, couldn't give the medication. The next nurse, here, will you do this? They need this. Run this down to this MRI. Run this down to this lab. She needs the med. She needs the med. So the nurse was like, oh, sure, I'll help you. It was chaotic. Yeah. She didn't have time to she's accountable for her actions, but she said yes in a chaotic situation. She didn't afford herself the freedom to have an appropriate boundary.
Well, Deb, I think in the psychiatric issues in the hospital and everything, that's especially easy to get upset with the patients, because the patients are there because they're distressed. Yes. And if we're not careful, we'll pick up their anxiety and their stress and their haste, and haste makes waste, the old saying. But that's why chaos builds up, and then more medication mistakes, people get frustrated, yell at each other, et cetera. And that's the opposite of what people need when they're a patient.
Correct. That's absolutely correct. We need to be able to assess the situation, going all the way back to assessment. Yeah. What do I believe is happening? Being self-aware. How am I feeling right now? Am I feeling peaceful about what I'm being asked to do? Can I peacefully say yes? If I can't peacefully say yes, then I need to say no.
Well, that's something that I really haven't thought of. I think I'd like to emphasize that. Peacefully say yes, not rush, not doing out of guilt or shame or conformity or those kinds of things. And say, because my dad used to say, you can decide in haste and then you'll repent at your leisure. In other words, long time. You'll have plenty of time to worry about it and wish you hadn't done it. And so I don't know that I was good at taking that advice, but that's good advice.
Thank you. Thank you. Before we take questions, I had one other good example I wanted to share, and this is about assuming that we have the answers. Okay. And we don't want to assume we have the answers for another. So at one point in time, my husband was working for Procter & Gamble, and he was offered a role in Michigan. And I was very prayerful and sincerely believed that we were not supposed to move to Michigan. My husband wondered if we were supposed to move to Michigan.
Wow.
And so this was like probably one of the first times that I clearly decided to respond by not being controlling and by not telling him what to do and what I thought we should do. I decided, I believe I was prompted from the Lord, to share my thoughts with him one time. And so I shared, I think we need to stay in Cincinnati because ABCD. And he thought he took us, he said, well, we need to just go to Michigan to see it. We won't know till we get there, till we see it. And I was struggling with the Lord. I was struggling like, Lord, literally, what if he takes us to Michigan? I hear you saying we're supposed to be in Cincinnati. What if he makes a mistake and takes us to Michigan? And I audibly sensed, heard, felt the Lord say, Debbie, get out of the way. If he takes you to Michigan, then you go to Michigan. We'll figure it out together. Get out of the way. And
Wow.
that's why I link back to that opportunity to grow. If I was controlling it, we wouldn't have grown, and I wouldn't have learned to trust him. Off we go to Michigan. Everything's perfect in Michigan. Churches, people we met. I'm like, oh no, we're moving to Michigan. He didn't go to bed with me that night. He stayed up and journaled. And he came and woke me up early in the morning. He says, we're taking the red eye back to Cincinnati. We're not moving to Michigan. I'm like, what? And so he explained to me how his process went. But here, if I would have been controlling, aggressive, deciding, mean, that would have robbed him of that opportunity to experience God in his life.
Wow, that is powerful, not only for spouses, but you're talking as a nurse and a therapist. You really do need to know some things and have some answers, but trying to put that onto a husband, a wife, a child, without options, without negotiating a little bit, and that's really, really hard, is extremely difficult. So let me remind the people, you can download the outlines. Deb has an outline for you. It's got these points on it. And if you got any questions, Andrea will come back here and give me the questions. Here they are. We don't have high tech for that. Our high tech is a paper. Thank you. Will you give a sample dialogue of a parent talking to a teen about several low grades in a row or some other negative behavior?
I could give 1,000 examples from my own family, both of how to control or how to let the teen make the decisions for themselves. The sooner we let our teens fail in the sandbox of our home, the safer they are. Mm-hmm. And so sounds like you, so what happens? We get a call from the teacher, or their math grade is bad, or they're not going to school. All right, well, you're not going to school today, or all right, you're choosing to fail this class. Talk to me about that. Talk to me about your class. Oh, I don't like the teacher. She hates me. I'm never going to pass her class. She targets me. Well, that's really frustrating that your teacher targets you, and she targets your friends too. Oh my gosh, that's got to be so overwhelming. Yeah, it really is overwhelming because she targets me and she targets my friends. And now I can't play football because my grades are bad in her class. Oh, so you were really hoping to play football, but you can't because you're failing this class. Yeah, and what am I going to do, Mom? I want to play football. I don't know. Well, what are your options? What could you do? And you could not play football. You could bring your grades up and play football. You could quit school altogether and go join a league in the community and play football. There's lots of options for you to play football. Do you have other ideas?
So what you're doing is leading that child through a decision-making process. It's not all one thing, that the teacher's making you miss football, but you have some choice in the matter, empowerment in the sandbox of their world, as you're saying. And they have to come to the conclusion, oh, which do I want to do? And they may fail. I mean, it's sort of like you and Pete. Like you could have failed. You could have gone to Michigan and that'd been it, right? But you...
Exactly right. But when we give them the answers, they're going to sabotage the answer. I homeschooled most of my kids all the way through. One of them sat at the table like this Monday through Friday morning and would not do this writing assignment, period, would not.
Yeah.
I'm just like, well, that's okay. I wonder how your weekend's going to be because you can't do all these things unless your assignment's written. He's a brilliant writer. He just waited enough. I was trying to control him. My days would have fallen apart. But I'm like, it's okay with me if you don't go to the party. You're a great writer. When you decide to write, you'll write. Can I bring you a glass of water, some chips? Would you like a sandwich while you're sitting here? I'd love to serve you.
But I would say, knowing all your 8 kids, or a little bit, some of them better than others, you had some extremely creative ones there. You had some extremely compliant ones there, and you had some rebellious ones there. Creative, compliant, rebellious, etc. And that is the 8 children. You had your own school.
Yeah, we did.
You and Pete did, and I know it was very, very challenging. And this is the kind of thing that happens a lot with us and with our children if they don't quote perform the way we want them to, and it may be embarrassing. We have another question, Deb.
The control keeps us stuck, and it keeps them stuck. They can't grow the more we control.
So you're saying a little bit like this, not tight.
I'm saying like this. What does that look like? We're connected, but your decisions are your decisions. They might affect me, but they don't control me.
A scripture on that is leave, cleave, become one flesh. We've got to leave home. Are you prepared to fly and leave home? That's the question. Now, another question is, are you ready to teach this to the entire medical system, not just nurses?
I would welcome any opportunity to share these life-giving skills with anybody that will listen.
Well, Deb, you're writing a book.
I am writing a book.
And when do you think that'll be ready?
2022, it's due to be published. It's called The Tapestry of Connection, and it includes all of these skills plus a plethora of others. And so the concepts as well as practically how to live them out. Yes.
So how could they prepare for that? Is there some place they can, you don't have it published yet? It's not on Amazon or anything?
No, but I believe we're going to put it on your what is your?
Relational Peace University.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to say Financial Peace. Yeah. Relational Peace University, yes. If
you're interested in this, you can tell us and we'll get that information to Debbie, and she can save it so then when it comes out, she can alert you and let you know. And I think that would be a wonderful, wonderful gift to everybody. I like a lot. I really admire Debbie, and she's done a great job over the years being a nurse and being a helper and a teacher in our seminars. And would say we're teaching these things too through, you can look around since you're all already on Relational Peace website, homepage. You can see all these other classes we have. We're going to have more all the time. Randy Creamer's got them. We've got some coming down the road. We're going to have one on fathers, more on family life. So tell your family and friends, this is the way they can get a lot of really good information without spending a whole lot of time, not having to travel overnight, go to all of those seminars, pay big bucks for that. As I've had pastor one time say, he and his associate went to Seattle, stayed 5 days. It cost him $10,000 to go, but he didn't want to pay $150 to come to my seminar because he wanted to take that trip. Now, I understand that, but you can get the same thing or maybe better by coming to these seminars. Deb, do you have a final word for people?
Press in, be inspired, be prepared to drop the ball. When we do, we learn, we grow, we close gaps. We can be role models for our children, for our peers in the community, in churches. People are drawn to positive mental health. Right. And the key to positive mental health is self-accountability with all of these skills and more.
Yeah, and I think that's really a good word. And these are applicable. I've never met anybody yet that didn't need to learn these things and the skills that go with them, not just the concepts. And especially people in any kind of leadership position, pastors and priests, school teachers. It was actually tried, a lot of research Rich Walters and his team did down in Georgia was with teachers. And it found out that as the teachers learned the skills, their students' grades improved. Just like if mom and dad learn the skills, the kids' grades can improve because they're making better decisions. So, final word, may the Lord bless you and keep you. I pray that you'll take advantage of all these. I hope some of you will sign up later and go back over it. You can read the notes again and ask any questions you can send to us at relationalpeace.org. Relationalpeace.org. So Lord bless you. Deborah, this has been exciting to me. Say hello to Pete and all your kids.
I'll do that. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you, Gary. Look forward to connecting.
My pleasure.